Hi everyone, this is Aash with the Ball Out, and today we are interviewing political pundit Cheri Jacobus. Welcome, Cheri. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you.
today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm hanging in there like everyone else, on the edge of my seat. Happy about
Yeah,
the election,
I
unhappy about
know.
COVID,
It's so good to
but
say,
hopeful,
yeah, hopeful. It is so good to say
hopeful.
President-elect Biden. I can't stop. I feel like I haven't been able to stop saying that. And then just like
Well,
practicing,
and
like
Vice
Vice President.
President-elect Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. I mean, for women my age, in my generation, I thought in my 20s when I started working on Capitol Hill, and I was a moderate Republican, but there was Geraldine Ferraro. So it wasn't happening then. So I thought, well, probably by the time I'm the ripe old age of 30, we're going to have a woman on
yes.
in the White House. And then maybe by the time I'm 40, and then maybe by the time I'm 50, and now I'm 60, and we finally are getting one,
Finally.
and we will have a female vice president days before my 61st birthday. So
Yay!
there you
This
go.
is big.
Yeah,
It took a long time to get there, but I'm happy that number one, she's female. Number two, she's a person of color. So a lot of things
yes,
are happening for
yeah.
women and women of color. So I'm really happy about that. So
It's
Cheri, would
it's
you like
it's very
to?
hopeful. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It is. Would you like to tell our viewers and our followers a bit about yourself and just your background, and what you do?
Pre-Trump.
Pre-Trump. Yeah.
Yes, well, I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Peoria, Illinois, originally, and the family moved east to Western Maryland, about an hour and a half outside of DC, in when I was 14. So I had the small town kind of upbringing there. Went to school in West Virginia, and worked in television a little bit locally. And then Reagan was president, and I made my way to Washington D.C., knocked on doors, till I got a job of starvation wages in a congressional office working for a moderate Republican. And I started working my way up through Capitol Hill. Then I went and became trained at what was then termed the West Point of politics, the American Campaign Academy. And I went out, packed up my Mustang hatchback, drove across the country, ran congressional races at age 28, at a time when women weren't doing it. But I didn't get the memo. I was naive enough to not know that I wasn't supposed to be doing that, and I was driven, and I was smart and hungry, and so I started doing that. I ended up running one of the closest campaigns in the country at a time when incumbents had about a 99.9% reelection rate, and my candidate, we were outspent 6-1, and we came within less than one half of a percentage point of defeating the incumbent. Next time my guy showed up, took the seat easily, held it for 18 years. So I worked in Republican politics on Capitol Hill. And then when Republicans took the House in the mid 90s, Newt Gingrich was speaker. It was the Republican Revolution. I was one of those leadership staffers. I got one of those big jobs. Again, not many women had them. I was a committee communications director. My colleagues were Ed Gillespie, Ari Fleischer. Ari had the same job as I did. And I was still a moderate Republican, but I was making my way through the ranks, and I've been, again, running campaigns. Went to the RNC as a spokesperson, and then kind of hit a glass ceiling as a Republican woman, and went out on my own and started my own business. And then I'd been on television a little bit while at the RNC, and then I started out just doing the pundit circuit. And again, in those days, there weren't that many people. You didn't see the gazillion people, so it was kind of special. You have to actually have credentials, and yeah, and not just having had jobs, but an actual record of results. So I did that for many years, started my own business as a consultant, started writing, taught at George Washington University's Graduate School of Political Management for 4 years. I taught political communication strategy in the master's program.
That's amazing.
And then sold my house on Capitol Hill in DC after living in DC for 30 years, moved to New York, started consulting, did TV from there, and then Trump hit. And that's a whole second story, half of the story.
Yeah. So while we're on that topic, you were a moderate Republican. Did you vote for Trump in 2016?
No, my story is that in 2015, the Trump people approached me and wanted me to work for them. And I had a friend who was going to work on a Trump super PAC. And he had contacted me, said, I'm going to be in New York a lot. We should get together, for dinner or something. I thought, well, this was somebody I'd known for 30 years, but we weren't such great friends that anytime he's in New York, he'd have to look me up. So I thought, oh gosh, they're going to ask me to work on the campaign. Well, as a consultant, I take a lot of meetings. I had some people associated with Carly Fiorina approach me about being political directors some months before. I didn't think it was a good fit for a political director, and I didn't really want to basically have to live in Iowa full time, and that's what a political director would do.
Yeah.
So then this friend the next day says, look, Trump needs a good communications director for the campaign. I want you. And I didn't want to just say no. So I said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. So we agreed to just meet for lunch. I'm just meeting an old friend for lunch, because you don't just say, God, no, I'm not going to work for this guy. And he brought along Corey Lewandowski, who I'd never heard of. Mm-hmm. He didn't tell me he was coming, and he brought him to the lunch as sort of an ambush. And they worked on me. And and then a few weeks later, I agreed to a second meeting. I kind of stalled. And Corey said, look, tell me what you need money-wise and all that. So then I agreed to a second meeting, met him in Trump Tower, at which point in time they started telling me all about the Trump Super PAC, because at this point it was just the exploratory committee. My friend was there. And then I witnessed some behavior on the part of Lewandowski that I just thought, oh, no way. And went down on the sidewalk, Fifth Avenue, and called my mother right away and said, oh my God, you wouldn't believe this guy just ran into just this loose cannon. And that was it. I told my friend, because he's telling me later in the day, oh, Corey really liked you and liked that you didn't get flustered and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, he's an emotional guy and a big job, and that was it. And then a couple of days later, emailed my friend and said, look, thanks for thinking about me, but I didn't really appreciate the hazing, and you have a great time working on that Super PAC. And that was it. And then a few months later, I noticed that there was a big story in the Washington Post about the Trump Super PAC. Mm-hmm. And Trump said, I have no Super PAC. I'm self-funding. And he was tearing down all his opponents that had Super PACs. And Corey Lewandowski was lying to the Washington Post reporter. And by the way, my friend was long gone by that time. He didn't even stay through the announcement. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, well, they told me all about the Super PAC. They talked about the Super PAC so openly in front of me that I was wondering if the laws had changed and that you could actually have a campaign in open collusion with a Super PAC. So I did some tweets very publicly, numbered them. I didn't know how to thread them at the time, but I numbered them so that it was very clear that I was confident what I was saying. I said, Trump has a Super PAC. Corey Lewandowski told me all about it. Trump went to 2 of its fundraisers. Kushner's mother gave money to it. And at that point, I was immediately banned from Fox after being on TV for a couple thousand times over, 15 years. Wow. And Bill O'Reilly hops on Gretchen Carlson's show midday unannounced and just lies for Trump. There's no Super PAC. And it was just because they had done this follow-up article, of course, the Washington Post is saying, well, there was a Super PAC and here's somebody who was there. And Lewandowski forgot about me. And that's when he acknowledged that, I'd been in there because they had asked. And I even said in that article, they wanted me to come and talk to him. Why not? And so at that point, we later realized when I was working with the FBI that catfishing of me started. That was clearly done by Team Trump. Wow. And then months later, yes. And then I go a few months later and I'm on CNN, forgetting that Jeff Zucker, who runs CNN, had greenlit The Apprentice for Trump when he was head of entertainment at NBC. So I'm on Don Lemon's show. I've been on CNN several hundred times over the years. I was a regular as prime time. I'm in New York. And Don Lemon brings up, is Trump self-funding? And I brought up that months-old Washington Post piece about how he had a Super PAC. He lied about it. He got caught. And that night, the next day, Corey Lewandowski went on Joe Scarborough's show and lied about me. And they said, Cheri Jacobus came to us a couple times, begged us for a job twice. We turned her down, and she's just, upset about that. So I'm immediately banned from CNN because Jeff Zucker, I later found out after I tried to sue for defamation. If I'd had this information beforehand, it would have changed things. Jeff Zucker put an order out at CNN, but it came from the head office. Don't book Cheri Jacobus anymore. She's a conflict because she, begged Trump for a job. Oh. And I'm sitting here. I have proof that they came to me. Yeah. So then, months go by again, and I now find out who the catfisher is. I realize I'm catfished. I'm threatened. I didn't leave my apartment for days. I was told um, Trump has guys in Queens. They might be over on their way to cause you harm. You know, somebody who's close to the Trump people who now is with Don Jr., but at the time was anti-Trump. This was this was early 2015. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? I have been involved in all kinds of political stuff, but nothing like this. I knew that I was one of those first people that knew we are not dealing with just particularly nasty political opponents. We're dealing with criminals and thugs.
Yeah.
So, then when the Politico was doing a big piece months later on the catfishing, and while they were calling around to the Trump campaign, but before publication, my email was hacked and the FBI got involved. And months go by, and then there was clearance, and I left New York. I was kind of back and forth for a while because I was involved in litigation. And I knew that I was being followed. I knew that they had information from my hacked emails they were trying to use against me erroneously. I knew that Trump had hired a firm that specializes in this to try and find out and confirm my whereabouts, so that if they could prove that I wasn't spending enough time in New York, that they could change the venue of the lawsuit. And so the FBI then got very heavily involved, and I had to spend much time with them. And then it went on for the longest time, and then they told me that they were giving the information to Mueller, because by this time we had a Mueller investigation. And the whole thing was just bizarre and frightening and ruined my life. And the media that went along with Trump, like CNN, they know what they did, but of course they can't admit it. They're not going to fix things because then they'd have to admit how in the tank they were for Trump. So it's been a nightmare, and I've learned that I'm not the only one. But my story in particular is harrowing. It's like a bad John Grisham novel, and this is happening in my life and my career, my reputation, and my livelihood. It's been a nightmare.
I bet. That sounds horrifying. I did not know any of that.
Yeah, a lot of details. And so I was very excited when the campaign started, and the Democrats had such a big field. And I always knew that Joe Biden was probably going to be the guy who could bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And I think we all are hoping, crossing our fingers from the beginning. It's like, we knew he was going to pick a woman, and I was hoping for Kamala Harris. I think we always knew that was going to be a strong ticket, and it was.
Yeah,
but
it definitely appealed.
We didn't want to jinx it,
Yeah. We're all just secretly hoping, but that definitely appealed to a lot of women, a lot of people of color, a lot of women of color, and just like, I don't know, everyone. It's just a power couple, but like a work wife.
Yeah, and with such a wealth of experience between them, with very different experience, just going through their entire professional lives, being just steeped in public service, and I'm not even concerned about the fact that Biden isn't getting all of the security briefings that he needs for transition, because Trump is closing him out, because Joe Biden was, Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he was vice president for 8 years. I think he's got this.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that. So I have a question. What do you think about how the Trump administration kind of handled COVID, where we're going with it? Because I know there's a lot in the news right now about, the second wave coming back, especially in California. That's where I am right now. It's just, the numbers are just increasing. How do you think, because then there's all these conspiracies with the Trump supporters saying that it's not real, or just, refusing to wear masks because they feel like they should have freedom. And
you've got about 5 questions in there, and I think I can try and answer them all. Obviously, Donald Trump has done a horrific job of handling this. He knew about it, and he buried it. He didn't address it. My brother is married to a woman from China, and they live in Alaska, but we had information, before anybody else on what was happening there. We're getting this information that is really like things that we couldn't even get our heads around. Is it coming here? Is it coming here? And then Dr. Dina Grayson, who's an infectious disease and pandemic expert, and I had her on my podcast recently, and we'd been in touch through all of this. And I remember her telling me back then, very early on, that China had 700 million people in mandatory lockdown. That's 1/10 of the world's population. That blew my mind.
Yeah.
So when we have Trump coming out, and then I'm hearing, from my brother and sister-in-law, what they're hearing from relatives, friends and relatives in China. So when I saw how Trump was treating this as if it were a regular flu and it's just going to go away, and when the spring comes in April, the heat, or whatever he was telling us, I was horrified and frightened. And I was one of the very early ones who was shopping early and hoarding food and helping my elderly parents and doing those things that you need to do. And I didn't necessarily admit it or tell anyone about it. And then eventually everybody else caught on, but I just knew. And of course, the fact that Trump, I thought, well, I know he's inept, but it started dawning on me relatively early that he's lying to us. And then when he just didn't know how to handle it, so he wanted everybody to rebel. What I think he's doing now, though, is very different. I think he's out there purposely spreading this. I think that he wants to make it as bad as possible because he's afraid that Joe Biden will show him up. Once Trump knew that he was probably going to lose if he couldn't cheat enough to win, he wanted to make sure that within 6 months, Joe Biden couldn't be the hero and save us. What Donald Trump, I believe, really wants is massive death and illness in this country, and for this pandemic to hit our country hardest and to stay here for a long time so he can say, see, Joe Biden didn't have the answers. Otherwise, there's just what he's doing is just, what Trump is doing is just so evil and ill-advised, and the people who are believing him and following this, I mean, his entire White House. I saw something on Twitter the other day. It says, Joe Biden has a COVID team, has a White House COVID team. Donald Trump has a White House with COVID. I mean, that's the difference between the two of them.
Yeah, it was actually
it says it all.
Yeah, it's impressive that Biden's already got, I think, 12 members on the team, right? That's really.
That was one of the first things he announced.
Yeah, which for us, I mean, this is huge. This is what we want to hear because we're all sick of it, right? Republicans, Democrats, we're all sick of not being able to work, not being able to see our families, not having, family members there present, family members who passed away, family members sick. We're all sick of it. We want a solution. So that was really nice to hear that the first thing that he did was put a team of people.
And his chief of staff is Ron Klein, who handled the Ebola crisis. So there's some big messaging there. This was the Biden right out of the gate. His first thing he announced, his biggest priority was COVID. And I think that even the people who didn't vote for him at some level have to find that somewhat comforting. That somebody's taking this seriously. But we're all, we still have a long road ahead of us. And I think we're all looking to our right, looking to our left, and wondering who among us won't be here next year.
Yeah, and that is really sad and hard to think about for everyone, especially with people who have family members, the older generation, and people who have autoimmune diseases. That is really scary. So with Biden and Miss Kamala Harris in office next year, what do you think this means for, our future and the future of this country? Because I can say to the world, we look like a joke right now, which is really sad. We used to be one nation under God. Everyone was united. I remember when I first moved here 10 years ago. I'm from South Africa, but I was born here. I was always so proud to have an American passport. And, American flag, it was just so cool to be American until 2016 when Trump came in and, kind of just made us look like a joke to everyone. So what do you think this means for us now that, we have somebody else, hopefully peaceful transfer of power in the office in January?
Well, I think in this country, we got to a point where we maybe took our democracy for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of people who turned out to vote, and for me, having worked in politics for so many decades, and the biggest thing you want is to have a reason for people to come out and vote. It dips a little bit in midterms and blah blah blah. And we all know that. And for those of us who do politics as I do, we know, what age groups and demographics are going to turn out when. We look at all that. How do you turn the vote? How do you get people out to vote? And so we see these videos this last time, people standing in line to vote early during a pandemic and standing in line for 6 hours, and we see people dancing and people with their camping chairs and their water, and these are older people who don't fit the profile of people who are going to vote if it's too difficult, and they're putting on their videos on Twitter and Instagram and wherever they can, YouTube and Facebook, and just showing their pride. You see people of all ages. Younger people are notorious for answering polls, oh, I'll vote, and then they don't vote because they find better things to do. And I think that voting became not just cool, but like, if you don't, you're gonna hear about it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And people took it seriously, knowing that I think in a sense people realized that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris needed to win by a landslide in order to squeak by.
Mhm.
We saw what Trump was doing with Louis DeJoy when he installed him to head up the postal service, and they started removing mailboxes so that people, obviously during the pandemic, they want to vote by mail-in voting, and this made it harder. And then the destruction and dismantling of the very expensive mail sorting machines to make sure that even if you found a mailbox and you found a way to put your ballot in a mailbox and get it through, it wouldn't be sorted in time. It wouldn't make it through. And then that's when they had it planned to do all of these legal challenges, saying, if it didn't arrive in the mail, postmarked by that date, that 8 o'clock, whatever, election day, it doesn't count. And these are disenfranchised voters. This is what Trump purposely did, trying to suppress the vote and cheat people out of their right to vote openly. And he thought his Republican courts, and every time he had a legal challenge, he's coming up there, as we've heard, without any evidence saying there's voter fraud. And so he had such this jigsaw puzzle of all these different ways to cheat and suppress the vote. In addition to the fact that I think they were able to do something with voting machines, I think they did in 2016 in key places. He had all these things he was going to do to cheat. But in order to make this work, particularly if you're going to screw around with the voting machines, which Karl Rove, a whistleblower, claims that Karl Rove says you can do that if it's a close vote and it's under 3% or 2% in a certain place, you can cheat. And I think that is what happened in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in 2016, and possibly Florida.
Mhm.
But even with that, I think that this was a landslide election for Biden, that it was too big for Trump's various ways of cheating to work. And he can't accept it because he was so sure that all of the things they had planned would work, and they're not. Now, I think a lot of these Republican judges maybe would have gone for Trump if it was close, but they see, you know what, this ain't going to happen, and I don't want to be on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
So I'm cynical for a reason. I'm cynical because I've seen things and I know things. And we know in 2016, on election night, there's a media consortium that does exit polling throughout the day on election day.
Mm-hmm.
And they, at 5 o'clock, the people who have that share it with other members of the media consortium. They're all sworn to secrecy. But an ABC producer was friends with Dave Bossie from the Trump campaign in 2016. And this is something Bossie and Lewandowski wrote about in their book. They admit this.
Mm-hmm.
This guy called them at 5:01 and said, you guys lost. You got a long night ahead of you. Told them exactly where they were losing, what the exit polling showed. And Trump told Melania, we lost, because then this information was passed along to, Reince Priebus and, to everybody, to Trump, to Kushner. And something magical happened over the next few hours. And Trump pulled out a squeaker with just 77,000 votes between Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, which is what won him the Electoral College. So I believe that's obviously very fishy. Mm-hmm. And so they knew exactly where they needed to go. It didn't take much, but he lost the popular vote. He was behind in those states. The exit polling showed he had lost those states. So something happened. So I think he was probably prepared to do the same thing, but you can only do that, again, when it's close.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was close.
It's funny how he tried all these ways to cheat, or like legally cheat, but not even like, there were so many things that happened, like ballot boxes being burned in like Hispanic neighborhoods, or the fake ballot boxes that were put in. Mm-hmm. And they didn't even denounce any of that. Like, they were just like, we're not going to do anything about it. They didn't care. But now that we won by a lot with the Electoral College and the popular vote. They're all like, "Oh, you're cheating, fraud, voter fraud, voter fraud." It's like,
Yeah. Well, the courts, his own courts are rejecting him because they have absolutely no evidence,
right?
and
There's no
everybody's
way.
weighing in saying it's over. And some of the funniest things now, if you notice on Twitter, some of the other blue check marks, the big names, are making fun of him in a very creative way. Because when Trump tweets out, this is the other day, he tweeted out in all caps, of course, because 700,000 votes in Pennsylvania, we couldn't have our poll watchers there looking over their shoulder, whatever. Because due to our great Constitution says, therefore I win Pennsylvania and I win the election. And Congressman Eric Swalwell, who is a buddy of mine, who is so funny and so smart. You remember him from, he's from all of this stuff, and he's got a wonderful book out on the impeachment process. And so he retweeted it, and here Trump is claiming, I won, and he said, awesome, congratulations, the way you would pat a 5-year-old on the back. And it was just so funny, and the sarcasm. And yesterday when Trump tweeted out in all caps, just, I won the election, exclamation point. And John Cryer, who was part of my, which I hope we can get into, my America Reads the Mueller report that I produced and aired throughout the last year. And actor John Cryer from 2.5 Men, everything, he's wonderful, and he's been on my podcast, very politically active. So he sees that tweet in all caps, I won the election, exclamation point. And he retweets it with all in caps and exclamation point, I'm made of corn, So I tweeted, Brad Pitt just proposed to me, and everybody starts tweeting these things. So it's to the point now where it is absolutely ridiculous that we have an incumbent president who doesn't understand that not only did he lose, but he lost badly, and it's over. It's over.
Yeah,
He's over.
it is, and I'm so happy. I just, how are they going to kick him out of the office? Like, I know for a fact he's not going to want to leave. He's going to, like, handcuff himself to like a table or the Oval Office or something. How do you think this is going to work out with the transition?
Well, I think he was hoping, he really wants this to go to the Supreme Court. He was hoping the courts would be with him. That's why he started building those extra barricades around the White House. Somebody the other day said it looked like now he's having a moat dug around the White House. I mean, we don't know what he's doing, but there is a process in place where the moment he is out of office and we have a new president and vice president, if he is still in the residence and in the Oval Office, he will be a trespasser, and he'll be dealt as such by the Secret Service, because those same Secret Service who protect him, well, right at the minute Joe Biden becomes president, they protect him.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who's deemed to be a threat to the president and the vice president will be dealt with. And at that point, Trump will be a layperson. He will no longer be protected from indictments, prosecution, and never was going to be protected in New York and other states where they have things. So part of his out is hinting around that he's going to run in 2024, because you can be president for 2 terms. Doesn't have to be 2 consecutive terms. First of all, he'll be old, his health won't be there. But Donald Trump is going to be mired in legal problems for, I believe, the rest of his life, as will his family. It's over for them.
Yeah.
They have mountains of problems ahead of them that he thought he could take care of by being reelected, and it's not happening. So even if he pardons himself, or if he quits before his term is over and Pence becomes president, Pence pardons him and all of his kids and everybody who did everything, lose to joy, and I fully expect that they'll pardon everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Shamelessly.
Mm-hmm.
There's still Tish James in New York to deal with, and so the Trumps have a long battle ahead of them. He's not going to run for president again, and I don't think that he would get close to the votes he has now, because a lot of the people that voted for him, maybe they're loyal Republicans, whatever, but they don't have anything to do with him. He'll keep his little MAGA, weird, wild, dangerous crowd, his rallies, the ones that survived COVID, maskless. But it'll just be, it might be a little bit like the Tea Party, only not as polite, but it's not going to be big enough to be a governing party. And I don't think that the mainstream Republicans, I think they're going to be scrambling now to show that they were never really with Trump, and to show, to survive.
I'm very interested to see what happens with even, the Republicans who voted for him in 2020. I'm really interested to see where they're going to go with the 2024 elections. So big question that I want to ask you is, why do you think so many white women, 55% of white women, voted for Trump in 2020?
God, their husbands wanted them to. I don't know. That is one of the big mysteries, because you've got white women where you can just draw a line down the room, and there's like a half of us that are like, "Are you kidding me?" And the other half that I don't know. And I think that's something that I'd like to take time to study, because I
Yeah.
don't get it. I get the whole white guy thing.
Hmm.
White men, it's easier for them to be racist and sexist, and the two kind of go close hand in hand.
Yeah.
I think white women tend to be less racist, because sexism and racism are, there are so many similarities.
Right.
I can't pretend to know what it's like to be a person of color growing up in America
Hmm.
during the time when I was young and through the 60s and 70s and on. But I have Black friends who tell me a little bit about it,
Yeah.
and my Black women friends, particularly those of a certain age, my age and older, professional women,
Hmm.
uh, have they've got to have both fun, sexism and
Yeah.
racism, and we
Oh,
have talks over wine, and you get
yeah.
the real skinny on this. So the similarities are there, and so that's why I think at least half. I'm surprised that more white women did not vote against Trump, just because of that, because he hates people of color, he hates women, he particularly
Yeah.
hates women of color,
Yeah. I mean, the way he
and
talks about women is just so nasty. Like when I
yeah.
think of Republicans, I think of conservative, and I think of like, religious or Christian, women who respect just themselves, and, they don't want to be around men who talk like that, because it's not.
And maybe they're comfortable with the patriarchy that is comfortable with that. I
Yeah.
don't have a lot of answers. A lot of it might just be it tends to be women who aren't as educated,
Hmm.
um, and I think that a lot of it is the information that people get. That's what I specialize in, political communication strategy. And the way people get their information is key, because they're not getting the right information. So when you're targeting an audience, like what we did with America Reads the Mueller report,
Hmm.
you have to look at, how do you reach these people? Where do they get their information? For example, most Trump supporters are not on Twitter. He's got huge swaths of his Twitter followers are fake. They might be on Facebook. Most aren't really online. So how do you reach these people? They only watch Fox. So you get them through local TV. So we aired America Reads the Mueller report, which I got a bunch of celebrity friends and real people. We read direct excerpts from the Mueller report. I had Morgan Fairchild, Montel Williams, John Cryer, Tom Arnold, Willie Garson, and we did direct excerpts. And we went to Hollywood, got studio time, everything. And we raised money and bought half-hour time slots on local TV. I was doing it like adjacent to an early morning farm report in Wisconsin, because a farmer getting up in the morning, he's not on Twitter. He
Right.
doesn't know half the stuff. They were told that Mueller cleared Trump, because that's what Barr told him. So we raised the money, air this almost 100 times in different markets around the country, in Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, Arizona. That's what I
Mhm.
did. That's how I spent the last year. And being very, I wasn't getting accolades. I wasn't doing the cool ads and putting them on Twitter or getting the pats on the back, but I was reaching the audience that needed to be reached. So when I think about how people get their information, one of the most dangerous things as a communication expert, I got some game in that area, but
Yeah.
as a communication expert, I can tell you that one of the most dangerous things that I've seen is when they were able to convince huge portions of this country that anything other than Fox News, Rush Limbaugh, Breitbart was all fake news.
Hmm.
They didn't tell them why. They just said, don't pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Once you're able to isolate and the herd and separate these people out, and these would be smart people, and this is the category, maybe this is where those white women are. You're
Yeah.
told you only watch this, and so there's all this information that they're not privy to, all the things that the rest of us are outraged over when we're on Twitter, and we do the different shows, we do our podcasts, and we're on TV and we talk about this stuff. It's information that these people are not receiving because they're told not to. They don't know that Mueller did not exonerate Trump. They don't know that Trump could have been indicted and still can be indicted for 10 counts of obstruction of justice in the Mueller report. There's so much information they don't know. I have relatives where I've tried this. I give them a piece of information, something that is documented fact, is not in dispute, and that's not true. If that was true, I would have heard about it. It's like, no, because you only watch Fox. You're not going to hear anything.
Right.
And so I think that was a really dangerous thing, where we reached a point where we have thinking Americans who think they spend a lot of time getting their news, and they're not. So Trump effectively isolated the herd from real information. And I think that's where a lot of that 55% of white women who voted for Trump came from.
Yeah. I do have family members in Florida and who are Republican, diehard Republican, people of color.
Wow.
Yeah. That, watch Fox News on
and only Fox News, because everything else is fake news. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Everything else is fake news. Don't believe anything else. Fox News is real, and that's the only information that we're going to get, which is so insane, because I remember, I tuned into Fox News to see what are they like spewing out, because it's crazy talking to Trump supporters who are just they're so close-minded, and there's only just one like path that they can see. They can't see anything else. So it was
called
just
brainwashing.
and I'm like, this really reminds me of great propaganda from Hitler. Like,
yeah.
People are just brainwashed, and it's crazy. I had someone tell me I won't vote for a socialist if Biden comes into office, and I won't live in a socialist country. Socialism. So, and I was like,
they don't know what socialism means.
Exactly. I was like, do you know the definition of socialism? Like, a lot of these people are uneducated, so they'll get a big fancy word, and then be like, oh no, I don't want that. Oh, that's really bad. I don't want that. So it's crazy.
Yeah.
And he said so himself, that he's going to run as Republican and target uneducated people. Like he said, and
he's proud of it. He laughs at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He knows his audience, and a lot of them can't. He got name ID from The Apprentice, but the real villains, I think, are the media, who propped him up through 2015 and 2016 because for kicks. They thought it was fun. He was great for ratings, and they stopped being news executives. And I'm going to mention Jeff Zucker of CNN in particular. And he would have there was an article where there was a big employee town hall meeting that Zucker had with CNN employees. It was during the Republican primary. And they were concerned that all of the coverage of Trump was in fact creating Trump as the nominee. And they were nervous about that. It didn't feel like the journalism that CNN was known for. Yeah. CNN has some of the best in the business, and they always have.
Yeah.
And they were telling the head of CNN, they were telling Jeff Zucker, this is a problem. And he apparently said to everybody, I don't care. Keep the cameras on him till the eyeballs leave. That's not journalism. Wow. That's reality TV. Remember, Zucker is the one that greenlit the reality TV for Trump. They're very good friends. Yeah. And he banned me from CNN as a favor to Trump. Wow. And again, because I brought up the super PAC, so Trump then tweeted about me a couple of times. Oh, Cheri Jacobus, begged us for a job, got turned down, and then went hostile. And that's when Zucker banned me, pretending to believe it. And that's why I sued for defamation, because that obviously had a damaging impact on my reputation and my livelihood. Right. And then I remembered Jeff Zucker greenlit The Apprentice for Trump at NBC. They're great friends. He did this as a favor, just like Roger Ailes did at Fox. So it was really chilling. All my years in politics and media, it's a pretty big deal to pick up the phone and call a producer or head of a network if you're on a campaign and say, we don't think you should have this person on. We don't think it's fair. That's just kind of not done. You can pay a real price for doing that. So it was shocking to me, and again, chilling, that Trump had this ability in the primary, not even when he was a nominee, and it was, okay, this network might be more biased this way and that. This wasn't biased. This was picking up the phone and saying, get rid of her, keep her off the air. That was chilling to me, that our media, our news media, uh, that this was happening, that he could have people blacklisted and they didn't blink an eye.
Yeah.
Because usually there's kind of a price to pay for that if a campaign tries to do that. So that was one of those points in the campaign when I realized, I don't know, I've never heard of a campaign having, a campaign might complain a little bit to say, look, can you have a few more of these people or that, but this was something else. Again, it was, one of those points where you're kind of like, this is different. I've never seen this before. I've never felt this before in a campaign, this dynamic. And again, I'd been working in politics for many decades at that point, and been on television and, been around the table in advisory committees for presidential campaigns, and been at the White House sitting around the Roosevelt Room as a communications team. So this was so different, and it was chilling that Trump was able to pick up the phone and have this kind of an impact. And they were doing it because he was so great for ratings, and they didn't want to give that up. So there's a lot of guilty parties how we ended up with Trump. And I pin most of it again on the TV news executives, the Roger Ailes, the Jeff Zucker, who just couldn't get enough, and they failed us. They weren't journalists; they were TV guys.
Mm-hmm.
So
just wanted the money.
We need women running newsrooms, and that's it's one thing to have them as reporters or anchors, but I think we need more women running newsrooms across the board, print and broadcast.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't think we have any right now.
No. So what's next for you? What are you working on? How are you overcoming this crazy block and blacklist from these crooks?
Well, I don't. There's, I do some writing. I've been focusing on a couple of other things. I started a new podcast. It's called Politics with Cheri Jacobus, and I'm on Libsyn and iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're getting on a few other places. And I've had some great guests. I just recently started it. And I did America Reads the Mueller Report this past year. Yeah. And like everyone else, I'm hunkering down for a long COVID winter. And then I'm going to regroup and figure out what to do next. But I am not a Republican. I was the never Trump Republican, but I left the party actually in mid-2016, and I didn't agree with some of the never Trump Republicans. Yeah. And some of the things they were doing, I think they were latching on to some people who weren't sincere. There's also, if the never Trump group becomes nothing more than they're trying to remake the GOP post-Trump, you can't do that without dealing with the people who supported Trump and enabled Trump and lied for Trump and went along with all of this. You don't have the numbers. And the never Trump groups is still largely white men, which I have no desire to be a part of a party that's still, they pick and choose which women are acceptable and safe and, malleable and all that. But there's just no GOP without the Trump GOP. So all it is, if never Trump people think that they're going to rebuild the GOP, you can't do it without the current GOP. And all that is which white guys are going to have power. Like they're just fighting for power. Yeah. But they're still all going to work together. So I just don't see how that works. As far as I'm concerned, the GOP is dead. I have no desire to be a part of it. Yeah. I vote blue. I'm an independent and I vote blue. I would very much like to be a part in a formal capacity, meaning like a job where you get paid, of working with the Biden people and the Democrats on making sure that they hold the current coalition that includes the never Trump Republicans, former Republicans, people like me. And I think they have an opportunity to hold us for a generation the way that Ronald Reagan was able to hold those Reagan Democrats for a generation for Republicans. Yeah. So I think that's where I can play a very valuable role. And so we'll see what happens there. Yeah.
Well, your story is amazing. I thought I did my research, but this was just
it's the whole thing is crazy. Like I said, it reads like a bad John Grisham novel. For a while it was frightening, and the things that were happening, I would wake up every day and and just sit there kind of stunned when you remember that this is going, and thinking, my God, nobody would believe this. This is just, I mean, all the time at the FBI, when they finally said, we need to talk to you, and, you know, 3.5 hours. And that's when I was hacked, and it was clear that the Trump people were using information from my hacked emails. And I know who had them, and I know, you know, how they were using them. And I know why it was passed along to Mueller, to Bob Mueller, when they were as part of the investigation. I don't know what happened to it. I may one day. There's someone who knows about these things suggested that because of some of the areas it got into and some of the people that it involved who were using information from my hacked emails. By the way, first, you know, trying to get me banned from USA Today when I wrote about J.D. Gordon's role at the RNC convention in terms of inserting pro-Putin language with regard to Ukraine in the platform. And I wrote about it. And that's when the first wave, there was a long effort underway to get me banned from USA Today. And they had a right-wing editor on the inside, and they worked on it for a while. And one of them was J.D. Gordon, claiming that I was paid by Ukraine. Well, I wasn't. But years before that, I was provided, I was given 4.4% of a software company in lieu of pay by a client. And then at one point, years before that, it appeared that, this is where the FBI got involved, it appeared that we were going to be up for a subcontractor with a defense contract. I didn't even know what country it was. It was for identification verification into their phones or whatever. And it was only after my little company was included in the proposal that I was able to, you know, everybody had NDAs and I knew what country it was. What was Ukraine? Because after Putin had cyber attacked them, their army needed all this security. So we thought, oh yay, we're going to get this contract and it's going to make us money. And it kind of disappeared like a lot of things do, because again, we were a subcontractor. And there was just enough email traffic, most of it was by phone, there's just enough email traffic for somebody who had my hacked emails to know that at some point I'd had something to do maybe with Ukraine. Wow. Yeah, and that's when the FBI got very busy and very interested. And one other aspect, and then there was another incident. There were 3 different instances that indicated that the Trump people had my hacked emails. So, and that's why it went to Mueller. And I don't know what happened to it all. And I do know that there are some IC whistleblowers who were hacked too, and we don't know what happened to that. So that was still when Sessions was AG. You know, it appears that somebody was having some stuff yanked. So that said, without getting into any more detail, I think that we are going to be hearing things about the Trump administration for the rest of our lives. We're going to be uncovering things. I mean, you know, years from now, you know, when you're my age, you're going to be hearing about things and that are being uncovered, much like we hear things about, you know, the Kennedy administration or Nixon or whatever. My concern is that we don't have the backbone to do what needs to be done with the guilty, with the bad guys.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that they're going to say, well, let's just move on and pardon everybody. And we need to heal and move on. And first of all, I think after what we've all been through in this country, we need justice. It's not about revenge. People need to understand, because this has been scary for all of us who value democracy. We need to have confidence that our justice system works, that the system works, that democracy works. And we need the bad guys to be held accountable. We need Barr, all of them. We need them to be held completely accountable the way the rest of us would if we broke the law like this. And when you start leaving the bad guys around, Roger Stone should have been in prison during Watergate during the Nixon years. The fact that they let him go, you know, if we didn't have if Roger Stone had gone to prison during Watergate, we might not have even had a Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to set an example moving forward, and that needs to be justice. You're right. Yeah. Because what's going to stop somebody else, another Trump type person in the future? And we don't want to deal with this ever again. We want this nightmare to be way behind us all, you know, and move forward with a clean, fresh slate.
Yeah. I think we owe that to younger people, future generations.
100%. I agree. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and, you know, taking your time to talk to me, talk to us, tell us your story. It's been so refreshing to, you know, have someone let me know what's happening.
Well, like I said, I think that uh, even though Trump is gone, Trumpism has to be killed. It
Yeah.
has to be. You got to put a fork in. You got to put a nail in that coffin. And I think one way to do that is if the investigations are hard, the punishments are just, justice is done, and that we all know exactly what happened. Because even the staunchest, craziest, maskless MAGA person can't deny all of this stuff. And so once you prove just how bad Trump is and these guys around him are, I think that's a good way to kill Trumpism, and that's what saves us.
Yeah. Let's just hope we move into 2021 with, a bright future and none of this Trump BS.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes. Well, again, thank you so much.